All right, Reddit. Get ready since this is about dysfunctional families, parental favoritism, and how I at last started to give my own happiness top priority. Let's just say, in terms of dads, I lost the lotto. Let's call my father Robert. He was the height of the austere traditional patriarch. In his universe, love was a commodity acquired by success, honors, and relentless compliance. It was not offered freely. Our house was run with an iron fist. His word was law. Any departure from his expectations was greeted with quick and forceful rejection. He was a successful businessman, a man who above all else appreciated ambition and success. He gauged value on degrees, work titles, and social level of respect. Sadly for me, I was his eldest daughter, the one he set all his aspirations and hopes on, the one meant to carry on his successful legacy. He saw Jessica, me, as a driven attorney, perhaps even a senator eventually. Stories of successful women, their images splashed on magazine covers, their names carved in history books would assault me. Among the ladies he held up as paragons of success, the women he wanted me to be like: Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton. For me, that degree of respect, confirmation of his parenting ability, that shining trophy to show on the mantelpiece of his own success. Dinner table talks frequently focused more on dissecting my current test results, reviewing my extracurricular activities, and planning my road to academic dominance than on sharing our day. "You have the potential to be anything you want, Jessica," he would say, his voice loud across the table. "But I know you'll make the right choices, the choices that will make us proud." And in those words, I heard the unspoken threat, the subtle reminder that my value was contingent on fulfilling their vision for my life. I recall one evening, when I must have been about 14, carrying home a B+ on a math test. In years, this was the first grade I hadn't earned an A in, so my dad's face darkened, his brow wrinkled, and disappointment thickened the air. His voice a low growl. "Jessica," he whispered, "I expect better from you. This isn't acceptable." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, the guilt burning in my cheeks. It was about failing to be the ideal daughter he wanted me to be, not only about the mark. Though she was more like a delicate bloom than a strong oak, my mother, bless her heart, was a beautiful woman. Her voice a whisper in the storm of his demands, she wailed under my dad's commanding presence. She loved me, I knew that, but she never could protect me from his unrelenting pressure or his stifling demands. She was a master of placating, of soothing ruffled feathers, of preserving a brittle calm in our house. She would often tell me, "Just try your best, sweetheart. Your father means well. He just wants what's best for you." Her words brought little consolation, a band-aid on a gaping wound. She was never able to really defend me, to stand up to my father and say, "Enough." And then the divorce came through. When it happened, I was 16 and it felt as though the ground underfoot had collapsed. Having always put up a united face, my parents abruptly broke into a million pieces, leaving me feeling lost and adrift. Quickly remarried, my dad had a whirlwind affair with Lily, the daughter of another woman already. Suddenly I got a stepmother and a stepsister, and my already fragile environment became much more unstable. Always keen to display his love for his new family, my dad gave Lily tenderness and attention. She became his new project, his new focus, and I, the daughter he had once been so committed in, was cast to the margins. He would volunteer hours assisting Lily with her homework, coach her soccer team, and go to her school events. My successes were greeted with a cursory, "That's nice, dear," while his palm waved dismissively over my hardships. He began missing important occasions in my life: my college orientation, my high school graduation, even a coveted internship in Washington, D.C. Each absence was a stinging reminder that I was no longer his first concern. His voice tinged with a cursory explanation. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he would add, "but Lily has a dance recital, soccer game, family gathering that day. You understand, don't you?" And I would nod, swallowing the knot in my throat, acting as though it didn't matter, as his absence left a cavernous hole in my heart. Nonetheless, it did. It was really important. I attempted to reach out to him, to close the widening gulf separating us. I gave him a call to go over my achievements, challenges, hopes, and aspirations. But his answers were constantly unfocused, his attention split, his mind obviously consumed with his new family. Resentment developed, a sour seed sown in the rich field of neglect. Living in Lily's shadow, a continual reminder of my father's conflicted feelings and shifting priorities, seemed awful. And as the years went by, the gulf between us widened and the gap sank deeper until the link of father and daughter shredded beyond identification. My escape, my opportunity to at last break free from the golden prison my father had constructed around me, was college. Reality, however, was quite different. Following me like a shadow, the weight of his expectations and the pressure to succeed murmured doubts and fears into my ear. I signed up for pre-law, the route I decided upon not by myself. I kept my perfect GPA, studied assiduously, and faithfully showed up for class. Still, my heart was not in it. The legal language looked dry and dead. The courtroom plays we studied in class appeared manufactured and artificial. I felt as though I was following a script created by someone else, one devoid of space for my own aspirations or interests. Something more, something that set my spirit ablaze and made me feel really alive, was what I craved. And at that point, I came upon vlogging. It was a revelation, a vivid, chaotic, and completely fascinating universe in which honesty came first and imagination ran free. Driven by the personalities, the stories, the unvarnished peeks into the life of people from all walks of life, I began to religiously view vlogs. People all around were sharing their experiences, hobbies, vulnerabilities, and travels. I watched them creating communities, networking, and earning a life following their passions. And I knew, sure deep in my spirit, that this was the path I wanted to follow. I wanted to connect, to share my own story with the planet. Beginning modest, I shot brief films on my undergraduate life, my battle with anxiety, and my passion of travel to new locations. I discussed books, movies, and music, and chronicled my exploits with my best friend Kylie, another creative person driven by adventure and narrative. Early on, Kylie was my confidant, rock, friend, and most avid supporter. She urged me to embrace my imagination, challenge my limits, reject the critics, and follow my aspirations. Driven by a shared vision and a relentless belief in our potential, we discussed ideas, shot films, and edited late into the night. Our early videos were unprofessional and unpolished, rough around the margins. But they also were real, sincere, and bursting with a passion that would appeal to our expanding viewership. People who related to our stories, our humor, our sensitivity, began leaving comments, messages, even fan mail, and my confidence developed along with our channel. Though it deviated significantly from the road my father had planned out for me, I started to believe in myself, trust my intuition, and appreciate the road I had chosen. But my fresh enthusiasm paid a price. My grades began to slide, my attendance in courses grew erratic, and my attention moved from legal textbooks to camera angles and editing tools. Sensing my revolt, my father became progressively annoyed and critical, his voice full of disappointment. "Olivia," he would say, "you're wasting your potential. You're throwing away your future. This vlogging nonsense is a distraction, a childish pursuit. You need to focus on your studies, on building a real career." His comments, nevertheless, went unheard. I had discovered something that really made me alive, and that kind of awakened my soul. I couldn't return to the stifling universe of legal literature and courtroom dramas. I was not ready to give up freedom, having tasted it. Our conflict grew more intense and the arguments got hotter. My father charged me with being unappreciative, reckless, and selfish. He threatened to cut me off financially and to disown me should I fail to come to sense. Still, I stayed true. I had discovered my voice, my enthusiasm, my direction, and I refused to let anyone, not even my own father, take that from me. At last I decided on the course of action that would permanently alter my life. I left college. It was a bold gesture, a rebellious act against the standards that had imprisoned me for so long. When I told my folks, the countenance of my father twisted with wrath. He expelled me from the house, labeled me a failure, a shame to the family, and a disappointment. "Get out," he cried, his voice trembling with rage. "I only want to see you once you come to your senses." Tears running down my face, my heart heavy with grief, and an unusual sensation of release, I went out that door. My family, my financial stability, my feeling of community had all disappeared. But my freedom has been considerably more priceless. With Kylie by my side and a camera in hand, I knew as I ventured into the future that I was at last on the correct road. The road leading to my own real self, meaning of success, definition of happiness. I staggered from the phone talk with Ron. A range of feelings whirled inside me. Wrath, uncertainty, curiosity, and a startling flutter of relief. Years of quiet, unresolved questions. A yawning hole in my knowledge of the past. There was at last a chance for closure. I informed Nick about the call, my voice quivering with a mix of nervousness and an odd buzz of expectation. He listened gently, his face a mix of empathy and worry. He did not offer unwanted advice nor try to guide me. He simply hugged me tight. His presence served as a consoling anchor amid the emotional tsunami threatening to sweep over me. "It's your decision, Sarah," he replied gently, his voice cool among the tumult inside my head. "Anyway you decide, I will be here for you." His comments were a salve for my spirit, a reminder that I had someone to lean on, someone who loved and supported me unreservedly. I agreed to see Ron. I needed closure, explanations, a reason for why he had done what he had, why he had chosen my sister over me, why he had left me heartbroken and humiliated standing at the altar. We met in a quiet cafe, a neutral venue free from the ghosts of the past haunting us where we could talk. Ron seemed older, more tired, his young confidence replaced with a subdued melancholy. He was really sorry. His voice cracked with feeling. He told me how Alina had been manipulating him, how she had constructed a web of lies and dishonesty, playing on his need to be loved and his fears. He said how she had cast me as the villain, the jealous sister seeking to ruin their happiness, and how she had persuaded him the baby was his. He talked of the years of remorse he had felt, the embarrassment of leaving me on our wedding day, the agony of knowing he had been used and thrown aside like a pawn in Alina's game. After a paternity test turned out the child wasn't his, he declared he had divorced Alina. His world had collapsed, his confidence destroyed, his reputation damaged. His wife, his family, his friends, his sense of self, all he had lost. As I listened to his account, I experienced a range of feelings: resentment at Alina for her deceptive behavior, sympathy for Ron for becoming prey to her plans, and an odd sense of vindication. My doubts about Alina had been validated, my gut feeling accurate. But Ron's speech revealed still another level of complexity. He talked of my family, of their unflinching support of Alina even after the truth came out. He said they had shunned him, blamed him for their family's disintegration, and denied Alina's part in the lies. My pulse dropped. Though I had always known that Alina was favored by my family, I had not recognized the degree of their prejudice or their readiness to ignore her deceptive activities. Their own daughter, without second thought, they had choose her above me. An explosion of wrath swept over me, a deep sensation of betrayal cutting well beyond Ron's desertion. Years of trying their approval, their affection, their acceptance had gone by. But all had been a hoax, a sham. They never really appreciated me, never really seen me. I came to see then that I had to decide. I could keep trying to get their favor, acting as the obedient daughter hoping one day they would realize my value. Alternatively, I could turn away from the family that had never really embraced me and start a new life grounded on sincerity, self-love, and real connections. I so decided with a heavy heart, but a fresh sense of clarity. I informed Ron I recognized he had been victimized by Alina's manipulation and that I forgived him. I also informed him, though, that the past was too terrible and the wounds too deep. I could not have a relationship with him. Then I accomplished something I had never done before. I broke all contact with my family, blocked their phones from my social media, and erased them from my records. Though it was a terrible choice, a pulling away from the people who had shaped my existence, it was also a freeing one. At last I found freedom, free from the standards, the assessments, the continual comparison, free to be me, to determine my own value, to design a life really mine. And I realized I wasn't alone as I watched Nick. His eyes sparkled with love and encouragement. I had discovered a new family anchored on love, trust, and mutual respect. And that was all that really counted. The wedding left behind a flurry of emotions. The residual sadness and bitterness against my father soon eclipsed the fun and excitement of the day. His outburst, his total disrespect for my emotions, his relentless backing of Lily, all of which left me feeling profoundly damaged and deceived. It was like a slap in the face, a sobering reminder that in his view, I will always be second best. I knew I couldn't pretend everything was fine, just push it under the rug. I had to face him, communicate my hurt, attempt to figure out why he had decided to give Lily first priority over his own kid. I needed him to recognize the years of neglect and favoritism that had molded our relationship, and to see the harm he had done. So a few weeks following the wedding, I contacted him and suggested we get coffee. He agreed, his voice shockingly quiet, maybe recognizing the weight of the matter. Alternatively, he might have been trying to keep things calm, avoiding any further strife that might compromise his carefully chosen picture of the ideal family man. We convened in a small cafe, the scent of freshly made coffee a sharp contrast to the bitterness developing within me. I inhaled deeply and started my well-practiced speech, detailing all the ways he had offended me, all the times Lily had been picked above me, all the milestones he had missed, all the chances he had lost to get in touch with me, my voice shaking with anger. "Dad!" I cried. "I don't understand why you always choose her over me. Why do you prioritize her needs, her events, her happiness over mine? Am I not your daughter too?" With years of hidden hatred and untold suffering, the words hung in the air. I watched his face, looking for a flutter of regret, a trace of empathy. But all I saw was a familiar mask of defensiveness, a taut attitude of paternal care that did not help to heal the wounds he had caused. He listened silently, shame mixed with frustration on his face. He moaned when I finished, his shoulders drooping like though he were bearing the weight of the planet. "Jessica," he began, his voice tired, "I know I haven't been the best father to you, but you have to understand, it's complicated. Lily, she needs me. She's had a difficult upbringing, and I feel a responsibility to make things right for her." His statements were like a slap in the face. Was he implying that my life had not been challenging? That my suffering, my difficulties, seemed somehow less legitimate than Lily's? That Lily had gone through, my years of longing for his affection and attention seemed small. My voice grew in irritation. So, because she had a difficult childhood, I'm supposed to just accept being sidelined, being ignored, being replaced? I questioned. What about my needs, my feelings? Do they not matter? He turned to face me, his eyes a mix of irritation and gloom. "Jessica, you're a strong, independent woman. You'll be fine. You're not the kind Lily uses." His words stung, a confirmation of my darkest fear, that I was expendable, that my value was assessed by my capacity to deal, to be the strong one. It was a familiar refrain, one I had heard numerous times during my life. "You're the smart one, Jessica. You'll figure it out. You're the resilient one, Jessica. You'll bounce back." But what about the part of me that just wanted to be loved, to be treasured, to be viewed as a daughter, not just a success narrative? My voice cracking. "That's not fair, Dad," I said. "I need you too. I need my father. But you're always with her, always prioritizing her needs, her happiness. You never show up for me." Saying he was trying his best, that he loved both of us, that he was only trying to balance two households, he sought to defend himself, but his arguments were weak, and his apologies sounded hollow. He obviously wasn't ready to own his acts and accept the suffering he had brought about. Then I understood he wasn't going to own the hurt he had caused, or provide an apology. He was too mired in his own story, his own shame, his own need to be Lily's good man. He couldn't see above his own viewpoint, or see how his behavior had affected me. Rising, my chair skimming the floor, the sound reflected the finality of my choice. My voice quivering. "I can't do this anymore, Dad," I said. "I need you to see me, to hear me, to acknowledge the pain you've caused. And until you can do that, I can't have a relationship with you. I cannot keep pretending that everything's fine, that your actions don't hurt me." Tears running down my face, my heart heavy with grief and an unusual sensation of release. I left the cafe. At last, I had spoken my piece and faced the guy who had molded so much of my life, the man who had neglected to be the parent I required. And I knew as I turned away that this was only the start of my road of healing, self-discovery, and establishing a life in which my own beliefs, aspirations, and concept of success dictated my worth instead of my father's approval. Meeting my dad at the cafe made me raw and uncomfortable. The agony returning with a fury was like scratching at a scab that had never completely healed. I had hoped for understanding and for an admission of the damage he had done. Rather, I found more evasion and explanations. Focusing on creating a life with Stan, the man who really saw me, who loved me for who I was, not for what I could accomplish, I withdrew into my newlywed bubble. He was my rock, my safe harbor, the one person who regularly showed up for me to celebrate my achievements and console me in trying circumstances. But the shadow of my father's rejection stayed, a continual reminder of the broken relationship, the unmet need for his affection and acceptance. I tried to ignore those emotions, to live in the present, but they kept coming back like a tenacious weed in the yard of my bliss. Then arrived the family get-together, a hated occasion I had been postponing for as long as I could have. I knew I would have to confront my father, to withstand his subtly expressed criticism and obvious partiality toward Lily. I knew, though, I could not ignore it indefinitely. In the end, family is family. That is what I told myself. My aunt's place, a large ranch tucked away in the countryside, hosted the party. I felt a familiar knot of fear tighten in my gut as I passed through the door. There was a clear undertone of anxiety as the air thickened with fake grins and tense exchanges. As expected, my father took no time to be noticeable. By the buffet table, he cornered me with eyes shining with both amusement and contempt, with sarcasm in his voice. "So, Jessica," he asked, "how was the wedding? Did you miss having your dear old dad walk you down the aisle?" I bristled, red in the cheeks. "Dad, it was a fantastic wedding," I said, my voice tight with a restrained feeling. "And I had someone quite special walk me down the aisle, someone who really cares about me." His smile wavered, then flicked with irritation. "Well, it's a shame you couldn't set aside your differences for the sake of the family," he added, his voice slightly accusing. "Everyone would have had a great moment." I tried to gently guide the discussion toward a safer area, but he was unrelenting. His words like daggers pointed at my heart. He said about my clothing, the location I chose, even the guest list, suggesting that I had specifically left out his side of the family. I experienced a great sense of injustice and a flash of irritation. He was rewriting history, positioning himself as the victim, the one victimized. He couldn't see, or wouldn't see, the suffering he had inflicted, the years of neglect and favoritism that had brought about this point. My cousin Sarah drew me aside later that evening as I was trying to flee the stifling environment of the gathering. She had listened in on a startling revelation in a conversation between my father and Lily. "Lily said she picked her wedding date on purpose," Sarah said, her eyes wide with incredulity. "She said she wanted to be the center of attention, and she wanted to make sure your dad would pick her over you." My blood was frigid. Lily had specifically undermined my marriage, my happiness, my bond with my father. And blinded by his love for his stepdaughter, my father had let her control him, use him as a pawn in her own warped game. Like tons of bricks, the insight struck me. I had been controlled, used, played upon. The favoritism of my father was not just a matter of taste, but also a conscious decision taken to give Lily top priority over me. I had a rush of nausea and a strong sense of betrayal more profound than any of his past behavior. Years of striving to win his love, his approval, his attention have gone toward this. Still, all had been for nothing. He would always pick Lily and give her wants, happiness, success top priority. My heart heavy with grief and a fresh clarity, I left the conference early. I came to recognize that I could not keep seeking a love absent from reality, or keep attempting to win the acceptance of a man who would never really see me. It was time to let go, to go on, to concentrate on the people who really loved and respected me. My husband, my friends, the family I had selected for myself. It was time to design a life free from the shadows of the past and the weight of unmet expectations, one full of joy, sincerity, and real connection. One turning moment was facing my dad in the cafe. It was like at last lancing a boil years of festering had been fermenting. The agony was great, the release therapeutic. Finally, I had spoken the years of grief and hatred, said my piece, and although it hadn't produced the apology or understanding I so much needed, it had brought closure. Walking away from the conference, I felt suddenly clear. I came to see that my worth, my happiness, cannot rely on the favor of my father. I had spent too many years trying to fit into the never really fitting mold Dad had developed for me. It was time to let go, welcome my own road, define my own achievement. Stan's constant help was appreciated. He held me when the tears came, patiently listened to my complaints, and honored every win, no matter how little. My rock, my safe harbor, the one person who really saw, loved, and believed in me. His support let me leap headfirst into my vlogging career. Working non-stop, Kylie and I produced real, interesting, and inspirational material. We journeyed the globe, told stories, and created a community of like-minded people that embraced our ideas of adventure, self-discovery, and living life on your own terms. Our channel grew, drawing a devoted following and creating doors to chances we had never dreamed about. We worked with companies, went to conferences, and even authored a book on our trips and encounters. The sense of fulfillment, the understanding that we were improving people's lives, was the biggest benefit, though. Viewers commended us for motivating them to travel, follow their interests, and challenge their personal constraints in many letters. And my confidence developed alongside our achievement. I had found my own validation and sense of worth. I no longer asked for my father's permission. On my own terms, I was living my dream, and it felt fantastic. My relationship with my mother stayed tense, but we worked toward a brittle peace. She would periodically phone, expressing her joy in my successes and providing wary support. But I knew her devotion to my father was still split, her love for me less than her loyalty to him. I understood that. I could not make her pick me over him or change her. I could choose, though, to set limits, defend myself, cut my exposure to their poisonous dynamic. I therefore kept developing my life, my job, my pleasure, without them. People who loved and encouraged me, those who recognized my achievements and embraced me for who I was, flaws and all, surrounded me. Along with Kylie, I explored many cultures, met amazing people, and made lasting memories throughout the globe. I wed Stan, the man who had supported me through good times and bad, the man who loved me without conditions, the one who had helped me to start believing in myself once more. Looking into his eyes as I stood at the altar, I realized I had discovered my own happy ending. A happy ending unrelated to my family's expectations or my father's approval. Built on my own terms, this happy ending is evidence of my resiliency, fortitude, and unflinching will to live a life full of love, happiness, and authenticity. The path hadn't been simple. Pain, sadness, and periods of uncertainty had all occurred. Still, I had come out of my past stronger and more resolved than ever. I had discovered my calling, my passion, my voice, and I had at last realized that real pleasure results from within, from accepting your own self, and from surrounding yourself with people who love and support you for who you are, not from who others want you to be. Life appears to have a strange way of revolving back around. A few years after severed relations with my parents, I got an uninvited call. It was my mother. Her voice was unsteady. She informed me my father had not had much time since his diagnosis with a major disease. A tsunami of contradictory feelings swept over me. Grief, resentment, a weird sympathy. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not even seen him since that terrible cafe encounter. Still, he was my father, the guy who had molded so much of my life, even if his absence and criticism had shaped it most. I chose to see him in the hospital. He seemed little, a shell of his previous commanding self. The sickness had removed him of his bravado, his arrogance, leaving behind an elderly man defenseless and facing his death. We avoided discussing the past, the damage, the bitterness. Rather, we focused on the present, my life, my work, my marriage, my kids. He paid great attention, and his eyes reflected a melancholy I had never seen before. And at that instant, I recognized him as a flawed, vulnerable human being confronting the end of his life, not as the overbearing father who had thrown me aside. I experienced a flash of compassion and a release of the resentment that had been simmering for so long. Not totally, I did not pardon him, but I gave him something maybe more worth: knowledge. I pledged to keep him in my thoughts, held his hand, told him I loved him, and so on. A few weeks later, he died. Though I didn't go to his burial, I sent flowers as a little token of closure, a farewell to the man who had been both a cause of suffering and a spur for personal development. I carried with me the lessons I had gained, the wounds I had acquired, and the relentless conviction in my own power and resiliency as I proceeded with my life. My own path, my own voice, my own happiness had come to me. And eventually, that was all that counted.